I recently faced my own worst nightmare. My HOA slapped a $30,000 lien on my townhouse over violations at a cabin 2 counties away. And her excuse? She said compliance follows the owner. But the funny thing is, the only thing that followed me that night was my security footage landing on the sheriff's desk. Let me start from the beginning. The courtroom is cold in a way that isn't the air. I sit beside my lawyer, Clive. He's a rock. His gray suit is perfectly pressed, his face calm. He looks like he was born at a plaintiff's table. Me? I'm a software engineer. I'm more comfortable with a keyboard than a legal pad. My usual uniform is a faded t-shirt and jeans. Today I'm in a collared shirt that feels like it's trying to strangle me. Across the room, at the defense table, sit the 3 people who caused all this. Karen Kennedy, Harold Pierce, and Roger Nettles. The AreaNow Estates Homeowners Association Board of Directors. The triumvirate of petty tyrants. Karen is the president. She's the face. She sits ramrod straight, her chin held high, as if she's presiding over one of her dreaded monthly meetings instead of a civil hearing. Harold, the vice president and treasurer, is the money man. He's sweating. I can see the damp sheen on his bald head from here. He keeps tugging his tie every few seconds, like a noose. Roger, the compliance chair, is their enforcer. Karen wears a bright red blouse with sleeves rolled. Harold's navy suit is damp at the collar. Roger's white dress shirt strains at the buttons. He's a big guy, a former high school gym teacher who never quite let go of the whistle and the clipboard. He's trying to stare me down, but his eyes keep darting towards the judge. They look small and scared, trapped in a cage of their own making. The judge sits high in a black robe. Clive's blue tie cuts a clean line against his gray suit. On an easel between us and the judge are 2 huge map boards. Clive set them up a few minutes ago. Board 1 shows a neat, tidy grid. Beside it, a photo board shows my cabin and a bold 30K placard clipped to the corner. Little boxes representing townhouses, green patches for the manicured lawns, a blue kidney shape for the community pool. That's HOA Estates. A red pin marks my townhouse. Board 2 is mostly green and brown. It's a topographical map of rolling hills, thick forests, and winding country roads. A blue line snakes through it, labeled Piney Creek. 2 counties over. A single red pin sits in the middle of that green expanse. That's my cabin, my peace. The place they tried to take from me. Clive stands. He taps the first map board with a long wooden pointer. Your Honor, this is HOA Estates, located in Williamson County. My client, Mr. Dustin Harrow, owns a townhouse here. He pays his dues. He follows the covenants. He then moves the pointer to the second map board, making a soft clicking sound. This, he says, his voice clear and steady, is a 10-acre plot of land in Hickman County. This is where my client built a small cabin. It is his private property, his sanctuary. He lets the pointer rest on the pin. It is located, as the court can see, approximately 75 miles and 2 county lines away from HOA Estates. He turns to face the defense table. Karen stares straight ahead, refusing to look at him. Harold is dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. Roger looks like he swallowed a bug. Clive lowers the pointer. The HOA Estates Homeowners Association, led by Ms. Kennedy, Mr. Pierce, and Mr. Nettles, decided that their authority extends across those 75 miles. They decided they had the right to regulate a property they do not govern, a property they have never even seen. He walks back to our table and picks up a thick binder. They proceeded to harass my client. They hired a private investigator to trespass on his land. They used HOA funds for this surveillance. And when that wasn't enough, they issued a $30,000 fine for violations pertaining to a property utterly outside their jurisdiction. He opens the binder. Then, Your Honor, they placed a lien on his home, the one inside their jurisdiction. He closes the binder with a solid thud that echoes in the quiet room. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression, leans forward. He looks at the 3 of them. His gaze is so intense I feel like I should duck. Let me see if I understand this, he says, his voice dangerously calm. It's Judge Evans. You find a man for the color of a mailbox and the existence of a compost pile on a property that is not, in any way, shape, or form, part of your association. Karen finally speaks. Her voice is tight, wound like a spring. Your Honor, the bylaws state that all properties owned by a homeowner. The judge cuts her off. Stop. Just stop right there. He points a pen at the map board. Do you see that thick black line? That's a county line. This is Hickman County. He then points to the other board. This is Williamson County. Your authority ends at the sign that says, now leaving Alea Estates. It does not have wheels. It does not follow Mr. Harrow across the state. The bailiff announced a 5-minute recess to mark exhibits. In the corridor, Karen, red blouse blazing like a warning flare, closed the distance fast. You think a creek saves you? She hissed. We can audit you into dust. Harold hovered behind her in his navy suit, worrying his tie. Roger planted his broad frame in front of me, white shirt gaping at a button. Clive slid between us, all blue tie and granite. Ms. Kennedy, another syllable and you'll be auditioning for a contempt hearing, he said quietly. A clerk wheeled the display boards past. Roger tried to look imposing and clipped a leg of the easel. The photo board wobbled. The bold $30,000 placard slid off, smacked his shoe, and skittered under a bench. A couple of spectators snorted before remembering where they were. The bailiff's hand rested on his belt. Back inside. Now. Karen's chin lifted, but her eyes flinched toward the courtroom door. Clive leaned to me. Let them make noise, he murmured. Every sound they make is another nail. I thumbed my phone's notes app open and locked the screen. No bluff necessary. We walked back in. They followed, suddenly smaller. I allow myself a small, internal smile. It's a programmer's smile. The kind you get when you find a bug that's been tormenting you for days, and the fix is just one simple, elegant line of code. For months, they had been a bug in my life. A persistent, infuriating error that kept corrupting my peace. Now, we were finally debugging the system. My grandpa, who taught me how to hunt on land not far from my cabin, always said, never start a fight, son. But if a bully backs you into a corner, you make sure you finish it. You finish it so completely they never even think about bothering anyone else again. I look at Karen, Harold, and Roger. They are in the corner now. They just don't realize how completely this is about to be finished. The judge looks at Clive. Mr. Benson, please explain to me how we got here. Clive nods. Of course, Your Honor. It started as these things often do, with a letter, and then another, and another. I lean back in my chair, the uncomfortable collar suddenly feeling a little looser. It all spun out of control so fast. It began with me finally achieving a lifelong dream, a promise I made to my grandpa before he passed. And it ended with them putting a $30,000 target on my back. How did it get this far? It all started with my search for silence. I write code by day and bought the cabin for quiet. Wood stove, well water, no Wi-Fi. Alea is where I sleep between trips. I pay my dues and keep my head down. That used to be enough. The first letter was almost funny. It arrived in a crisp white envelope with the Alea Estates logo embossed in the corner. It was from the Architectural Control Committee, chaired by none other than Roger Nettles. It informed me that an unapproved structure had been noted on my property. It cited a violation of Bylaw 7, Section 4. All outbuildings, including sheds and gazebos, must be pre-approved. I read it 3 times. I looked out my window at my tiny, perfectly manicured patch of grass. There were no sheds, no gazebos, not even a gnome. I figured it was a mistake, a simple clerical error. I tossed it. A week later, a second letter arrived. This one was sterner. Second notice, unapproved structure. It mentioned a fine of $50 per day until the structure was removed or approved. I called the HOA office. The receptionist sounded bored. She told me Mr. Nettles was the one to talk to. I left a message. He never called back. Then my neighbor Sarah, a quiet nurse who lived 2 doors down, caught me checking my mail. Get another one? She asked, nodding at the envelope in my hand. Yeah, I said. They seem to think I built a shed in my living room. She didn't smile. They're on a tear, she said, her voice low. Karen Kennedy got re-elected as president, and she's trying to prove she's tough. They fined the Hendersons $500 because their basketball hoop was an inch too close to the sidewalk. That weekend, I ran into another neighbor, Freddie. Good old neighbor Freddie. Freddie's a nice guy, but he's terrified of his own shadow, and most of that shadow is cast by the HOA. Dustin! Hey! He whisper-shouted from across the street. Did you hear? They're doing property audits. I just waved. What does that even mean? I asked. I don't know, he said, wringing his hands. But Harold Pierce was telling everyone at the pool that they're using new software to cross-reference public records, making sure everyone is in full compliance on all fronts. It sounds serious. That's when a little alarm bell went off in my head. I'm a software guy. I know what you can do with public records. You can pull deeds, you can see property taxes, you can find out everything a person owns. A cold, sinking feeling started in my gut. They weren't talking about a shed on my townhouse lawn. They couldn't be. That was insane. It was also, I was beginning to suspect, exactly what was happening. The third letter confirmed it. This one was from Karen Kennedy herself. It came via certified mail, so I had to sign for it. It included a grainy photograph. It was a picture of a delivery truck, a flatbed, dropping off a load of lumber. The truck had a sign on the door for a local hardware store near my cabin. In the background, you could see the cleared patch of land where my cabin now stood. The letter was smug. It has come to our attention that you have constructed an unapproved outbuilding. Please see the attached photo. This structure is in violation of numerous AREA Estates covenants, including but not limited to unapproved roofing materials, non-compliant siding color, and the presence of a wood-burning stove. I stared at the paper, my mind struggling to process the sheer audacity. They had pulled the deed to my private land. They had found a picture online from the delivery company's social media page, and they were trying to find me from my cabin, my grandpa's cabin, a place that was physically, legally, and spiritually a universe away from their little kingdom of beige. The letter went on. It listed daily fines, retroactive to the date of the photograph. The total was now over $3,000. It demanded I submit architectural plans for the cabin for their approval immediately. It was signed by Karen, Harold, and Roger, the unholy trinity. I didn't respond. What could I say? Dear psychopaths, you are aware that you don't rule the entire state of Tennessee, right? Arguing with them would be like trying to explain calculus to a rock. A week of silence passed. Then the final envelope arrived. It was thick. It was also certified. I signed for it, my hand steady. I knew this was the big one. I opened it right there at the mailbox. Inside was a long, jargon-filled document. But I found the important words soon enough. Notice of lien, and a number, $30,000. Their bylaws allow liens for unpaid assessments. They relabeled the cabin fines as assessments to attach the lien to my townhouse. They had taken the daily fines, added legal fees, administrative costs, and probably a fee for being annoying, and they had slapped a lien on my townhouse, my home. They were leveraging the one thing they controlled to punish me for something they didn't. They were trying to reach across 2 counties and choke the life out of my dream. I stood there, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. The sun was shining, birds were chirping. It was a perfect suburban afternoon. But a war had just been declared. They had crossed a line, my line, and my grandpa's voice was echoing in my head. Finish it. My first call was to Clive. I found him through a friend who'd had a run-in with a different HOA a few years back. The friend's recommendation was simple. Clive doesn't just fight them, he dismantles them. That sounded about right. I explained the situation over the phone. He was silent for a long moment. I could hear the faint sound of him tapping a pen on his desk. Let me get this straight, Mr. Harrow, he said finally, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. They found a public deed for a property you own in Hickman County. They found a photo online of a delivery to that property. And from that, they've concocted a $30,000 fine and liened your home in Williamson County. That's the short version, I said. I heard him chuckle. It was not a happy sound. It was the sound of a lawyer who's seen this before. Mr. Harrow, he said, I've been doing this for 20 years. I have seen petty. I have seen vindictive. But this is a new level of stupid. This is weaponized incompetence. I'll take the case. His confidence was reassuring, but I knew this wasn't going to be a simple fix. People like Karen, Harold, and Roger don't operate on logic. They operate on power. They had the power to file a lien, and in their minds, that made it right. A lien is a nasty piece of business. It clouds the title to your property. You can't sell. You can't refinance. It just sits there, an anchor chained to your biggest asset until you pay the debt. It's a bully's favorite legal tool. Clive's advice was clear. Don't engage with them, not a word. Let them think you're scared. Let them think they're winning. In the meantime, we need more than just their ridiculous letters. We need to see how far they're willing to go. I knew what he meant. They had already crossed a line with the public records search. Were they bold enough to cross a physical one? I drove out that weekend, set 4 trail cams, gate, porch, mailbox, compost, and came home to wait. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. The only notifications I got were from a family of raccoons who seemed to have a nightly party on my front porch, and a very large owl that liked to perch on my mailbox. I was starting to think maybe I was paranoid. Maybe the lien was the end of it. Maybe they would just sit back and wait for me to crack under the financial pressure. I was wrong. The notification came just after midnight on a Tuesday. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The alert was from the camera on the driveway. I opened the app, my heart pounding a little. A grainy black and white video started to play. A dark sedan, a generic-looking Ford, was pulling up to my gate. The headlights cut out. A man got out. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes. He carried a small bag. Another alert. The mailbox camera. It was him. He pulled a tape measure from his bag and carefully measured the dimensions of the mailbox. He wrote something down on a notepad. Then he took out his phone and snapped several pictures of it from different angles. He was methodical, professional. My stomach tightened. This wasn't Roger Nettles on a field trip. This was someone they had hired. A third alert. The camera on the cabin. He was on my porch. He walked the perimeter, shining a small flashlight on the windows, the siding, the stone foundation. He was documenting everything. The final alert was the one that made my blood run cold. The compost pile. He stood over my bin of leaves and coffee grounds and vegetable scraps as if it were a crime scene. He took pictures. Pictures of my garbage. This stranger, this trespasser, sent by 3 petty tyrants from another county, was standing in the dark on my property, taking pictures of my compost. The violation felt profound. It wasn't about the land anymore. It was about the principle. A man's home is his castle. My cabin was my fortress. And they had sent a spy over the wall. I saved all 4 video clips. I backed them up to the cloud. I watched them again. I zoomed in on the man's face. He was just a guy doing a job. But he was also a criminal. He was trespassing. And I knew exactly who to call about trespassers in Hickman County. This wasn't Alia Estates, where the biggest crime was leaving your recycling bin out for an extra hour. This was the country. People out here take property rights very, very seriously. And so does the local sheriff. The next morning, I called the Hickman County Sheriff's Department. I didn't get a complicated phone tree. I got a real person, a woman named Deputy Miller. Her voice was calm and had a slight twang that instantly put me at ease. I explained who I was and what was happening. I told her about the HOA, the lien, and the videos. I was careful to keep my voice even, laying out the facts like I was describing a software bug. No emotion, just data. So, let me get this straight, she said, after I'd emailed her the video clips. This fella drove all the way out from Williamson County to measure your mailbox in the middle of the night? And to photograph my compost pile, I added. I heard her sigh. Lord have mercy, she muttered. We get some strange ones out here, but that's a new one. Well, Mr. Harrow, trespassing is trespassing. His face is clear as day in that last video. And I got his license plate from the first one. Let me make a call or two. I have a feeling I know who this is. She was better than her word. She called back an hour later. Okay, she said. Your night photographer is a private investigator out of Franklin. Name's Bert Higgins. Runs a one-man shop. Mostly handles messy divorces. Seems he's branching out. My mind raced. A private investigator. They had spent HOA money to hire a PI to spy on me. This was worse than I'd imagined. So what happens now? I asked. Well, that's up to you, Deputy Miller said. You're the victim here. You can press charges for criminal trespass. It's a Class C misdemeanor, but it's a charge. It'll mess up his PI license for sure. Or, she paused, we could use this. I knew what she meant. We could use this as leverage. Let's use it, I said without hesitation. My grandpa didn't just teach me to finish fights. He taught me that sometimes the best way to win is to turn your enemy's strength into a weakness. Karen, Harold, and Roger thought hiring a professional was a smart move. They were about to find out it was their biggest mistake. Deputy Miller arranged the meeting. She called Bert Higgins and had a very simple conversation. She told him she had video evidence of him trespassing on my property and a clear shot of his license plate. She told him the property owner was willing to press charges. Then she offered him an alternative, a friendly chat. At the sheriff's office. Unsurprisingly, Bert chose the chat. Clive drove down from Nashville to join me. We met in a small, sterile interview room. It was just me, Clive, Deputy Miller, and Bert. Bert was a man in his 50s, with a weary look about him. He was dressed in a cheap suit and looked like he hadn't slept well. His hands were trembling slightly. He knew he was in a jam. "Mr. Higgins," Clive began, his voice smooth as silk. "We have a bit of a problem. You were on my client's private property without his permission. That's a crime that could be very inconvenient for someone in your line of work." Bert just nodded, his eyes fixed on the table. "Now," Clive continued, "my client is a reasonable man. He's not interested in ruining your career over this. He's interested in who sent you. He's interested in what they asked you to do. And he's very interested in seeing all of your correspondence with them." Bert looked up. He glanced at Deputy Miller, who gave him a look that said, "Don't even think about it." He looked at me. I just stared back, my face a blank mask. I wasn't going to give him an ounce of sympathy. He took a deep breath. "It was the HOA," he mumbled. "The Elia Estates HOA. Karen Kennedy hired me." "And what precisely did she hire you to do?" Clive asked, leaning forward. "She said they had a homeowner with numerous violations at a secondary property. She wanted me to go out there, get photographic evidence of the violations they suspected. The mailbox, the siding, the compost pile, the wood stove chimney. She gave me a whole list." He was talking fast now, the words tumbling out. He was desperate to cooperate. "She said it had to be discreet. She said the homeowner was difficult." I almost laughed. Difficult. Because I wouldn't bow down to their insane demands. I was difficult. "We're going to need everything, Bert," Clive said. "Every email, every text message, every invoice, your full report, everything. You give us that, and Mr. Harrow agrees not to press charges. You don't. And Deputy Miller here will be happy to escort you over to booking." Bert didn't need any more convincing. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thin laptop. Within minutes, he was forwarding a chain of emails to Clive's address. He showed us the invoices he had submitted to the HOA. $2,000 for the initial investigation, another $500 for the night surveillance. All of it billed to the Elia Estates Homeowners Association. All of it paid for by me and Sarah and neighbor Freddie and everyone else who paid their dues. As I watched the emails pop up on Clive's phone, I felt a shift inside me. This was no longer just a defense. We were now on offense. The emails from Karen were incredibly revealing. They were demanding, arrogant, and filled with a shocking sense of entitlement. One line stood out. "We need irrefutable proof of his non-compliance," she had written to Bert. "We must make an example of Mr. Harrow. The other homeowners need to see that the rules apply to everyone, no matter where they think they can hide." Hide. She thought I was hiding at my cabin. She didn't understand. I wasn't hiding from them. I was living a life that had nothing to do with them. And that, I realized, is what they couldn't stand. It wasn't about the rules. It was about control. My peaceful off-grid cabin was an act of defiance to them, and they were using our money to try and crush it. Bert packed up his laptop, a relieved man. He had dodged a bullet. He had no idea he had just handed us the gun. The emails were bad. They showed intent and malice. But the invoices were worse. They were a breadcrumb trail. And I had a feeling I knew where they would lead. They showed us that Karen, Harold, and Roger weren't just watching me. The whole neighborhood was paying for it. The invoices from Bert Higgins were our Rosetta Stone. They gave us dates, payment amounts, and most importantly, they showed who had authorized the payments. Every invoice was signed off by two people, Harold Pierce, the treasurer, and a second, less familiar name, Linda Calloway, assistant treasurer. Clive did some digging. Linda was a retired accountant who volunteered for the HOA. She was a quiet, unassuming woman who had lived in Elia Estates for over a decade. She was, according to the neighborhood grapevine that Sarah tapped into for me, universally regarded as honest and meticulous. She was the perfect person to have on your side. She was also, we suspected, the weak link in their chain of command. A person like that, a person who values order and rules, would not be comfortable with what was happening. We just had to give her a safe way to say so. Clive advised against me approaching her directly. It would look like intimidation. Instead, he drafted a carefully worded letter. It was addressed to Linda personally, not to the HOA. It stated that we had evidence of potential misappropriation of HOA funds related to invoices from a private investigator. It gently informed her that as an authorizing party, she could be held liable. It offered her a confidential meeting with me and my attorney to discuss the matter. It was a polite, professional, and terrifying letter. We sent it to her home address via courier. We wanted to make sure she was the only one who saw it. 2 days passed. The silence was deafening. I started to worry we had miscalculated, that she was more loyal to Karen than we thought. Then, on the 3rd day, I got a text message from an unknown number. Diner on Main Street tomorrow, 10 a.m., come alone. That was it. No name. I sent a screenshot to Clive. His response was immediate. Go. Be calm. Just listen. Next morning at a corner booth, Linda waited with a coffee and a tight grip on the cup. I sat. Linda? I asked. She just nodded, not meeting my eyes. Thank you for coming, I said softly. I'm not here for them, she whispered, finally looking up. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I'm here for the neighborhood, for my neighbors whose money they are stealing. She spoke in a low, rushed voice, as if she was afraid of being overheard even in a noisy diner. I've been the assistant treasurer for 5 years. It was always fine. We'd argue about the budget for pool furniture, things like that. But when Karen got elected president, everything changed. Her and Harold and Roger. They act like the HOA is their own private kingdom, and the treasury is their personal bank account. She took a shaky breath. When the invoices for that investigator came through, I asked Harold about it. I said, "What is this for?" "We don't have a budget for private eyes." He told me it was for a sensitive compliance issue and that Karen had approved it under executive authority. It felt wrong. I didn't want to sign off, but he and Roger cornered me after a meeting. They said if I didn't, I would be obstructing the board's work. They said I could be held responsible if the rogue homeowner caused the association any legal trouble. I was scared, so I signed. Her story poured out of her. She told me about other expenses. Special legal consultations that were just meetings with an aggressive lawyer to draft threatening letters. Community patrol enhancements, and then she got to the big stuff. They're using the reserve funds, Dustin, she said, her voice dropping even lower. The money we're supposed to be saving for a new roof on the clubhouse. They spent $7,000 on a drone, a high-end one with a zoom lens. They said it was for roof inspections. They've flown it twice. Both times parked on public pull-offs near your cabin, filming the roof and yard. I felt a chill run down my spine. A drone. They were flying a drone over my home. The violation was staggering. It gets worse, she said. She reached into her large purse and pulled out a plain manila envelope. She slid it across the table. I resigned this morning, effective immediately. I can't be a part of this anymore. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single thumb drive. What's this? I asked. It's everything, she said. I've been making copies for months. Every invoice, every receipt, every budget transfer. It's all there. The motel bills for that PI, because Karen put him up in a hotel for 2 nights to do his surveillance. The rental receipts for the drone, and the best part, she leaned in. The purchase order for a custom-decaled fake patrol car. I must have looked confused. They bought a used Ford Crown Victoria, a retired police car, she explained. And they paid a company $3,000 to put Alia Estates Security Patrol decals on the side. Roger drives it around on weekends. He thinks it makes him look official. It's all in there, paid for with our money. I held the thumb drive in my hand. It felt heavy, dense with their corruption. This was it. This was the key. This was more than just a case against a runaway HOA. This was evidence of potential crimes, fraud, embezzlement. Linda stood up, her coffee untouched. "Do what you have to do," she said. "They've been bullying good people for too long. Someone has to make them stop." She walked out of the diner without looking back, leaving me alone in the booth with a small piece of plastic that held the seeds of their destruction. They weren't just bullies anymore. They were criminals. And now, I had the proof. That night, after the diner, I drove to the cabin and killed the lights a mile out. I parked on a logging spur and hiked the rest, boots soft in the duff. 10 minutes later, the air picked up a thin, mosquito-pitch whine. A dark quadcopter drifted in from the ridge, green nav LEDs winking. It hovered over the stovepipe like a curious hornet. I snapped photos, then hit a handheld spotlight. The beam lit the drone. It skittered sideways and peeled toward County Road 6. I cut through the trees. At the turnout above the creek sat a battered Crown Victoria, ex-police, amber light bar on the roof, a magnetic Alia Estate Security Patrol, decal half peeled. Roger's white shirt glowed in the dash light as he hunched over a controller. Harold, still in that navy suit, slapped at mosquitoes. "Just get the chimney," he muttered. I filmed 30 seconds, caught the plate, and texted it to Deputy Miller. She replied, "On my way. Stay back." Before the county SUV crested the hill, the Crown Vic fishtailed in gravel and fled. The drone shot up and vanished. It didn't matter. The plate, faces, and my footage would later sit neatly beside Linda's receipts. The next afternoon, I plugged the thumb drive into his laptop, and we spent the next 2 hours scrolling through a meticulously organized collection of digital files. Linda was as good as her word. It was all there. A spreadsheet of every questionable expenditure, scanned copies of receipts, the email chain where Harold and Karen discussed buying the fake patrol car, arguing over whether to get the full police-style light bar or the more subtle version. It was a complete and total indictment of their reign. They had been using the HOA's bank account like their own personal ATM for their weird power trip. Clive leaned back in his leather chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Dustin," he said, "this is no longer a civil dispute about a lien. This is a criminal matter. We have them, cold. But just having the evidence wasn't enough. We could win in court, eventually. But that would take months, maybe years. The lien would still be on my house. And in the meantime, Karen, Harold, and Roger would continue to rule Alia Estates, free to destroy the evidence or intimidate other residents. "We need to end this now," I said. "We need to cut the head off the snake." Clive nodded. "I agree. A courtroom victory is quiet. We need something loud. We need to expose them to the one group they're truly afraid of, their own neighbors." That's when we hatched the plan. It was simple, a little theatrical, and it used their own arrogance against them. We needed to lure them out. We needed to get them on camera, out of their element, trying to enforce their non-existent authority where the whole world could see it for the farce it was. We needed them to come to the cabin. The bait was a rumor. I called my neighbor Sarah. I told her a little of what was going on, that we had a plan to deal with the board once and for all. I asked her to do me a favor. "I need you to start a rumor," I said. "I need you to tell neighbor Freddie that you heard I'm building a large, unapproved deer skinning shed at my cabin." Sarah laughed. "A deer skinning shed? That's wonderfully specific. Freddie will have that all over the neighborhood by lunchtime." She was right. Neighbor Freddie was a world-class gossip, and his fear of the HOA made him hyper-aware of any potential violation. The rumor was designed to be irresistible to Karen and her cronies. It was a direct challenge to their authority. It was me, the difficult homeowner, thumbing my nose at them again. They would have to respond. They wouldn't be able to resist coming out to my cabin to see it for themselves. The next step was to set the stage. I called Deputy Miller in Hickman County. I explained the plan. She loved it. "So, you want me to be there when they show up to yell at you about a fake shed on a property they don't control?" she asked. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. The sheriff will probably want to come along for this one. He enjoys a good bit of street theater." The final piece was the audience. Clive made a call to a journalist he knew at a local TV station, a guy who specialized in consumer protection stories. The reporter, a young hungry guy named Ben, jumped at the chance. An HOA story with this kind of twist? It was ratings gold. Saturday morning, the news van waited down the road. The sheriff sat just inside my gate. I watched from the porch. A silver Lexus rolled up, Karen driving, Harold and Roger in tow, stopping at my locked gate and the big no trespassing sign. They hadn't seen me yet. They clearly expected me to come to them. This was their moment. They were the board, arriving to lay down the law. I stayed on the porch, let them wait. After a minute, Karen, clearly impatient, strode up to the gate and rattled it. "Mr. Harrow," she called out, her voice sharp and commanding. "We know you're in there. We are here to conduct a compliance inspection." As if on cue, Sheriff Wallace's car rolled quietly out from behind the pines and parked right behind their Lexus, blocking them in. The sheriff, a big man with a kind face and a no-nonsense air, stepped out of the car, followed by Deputy Miller. At the same time, down the road, the news van's side door slid open, and Ben the reporter hopped out, his cameraman right behind him, both filming from the public shoulder, the camera already on his shoulder, and pointed their way. The gate and drive were posted private road. No trespassing. I'd already reported an attempted entry. The three of them froze. Their faces were a perfect picture of confusion, which quickly curdled into panic as they realized what was happening. Karen's jaw went slack. Harold looked like he was about to be sick. Roger's tough guy act dissolved into a puddle of sweat. The sheriff walked calmly up to them. "Good morning, folks," he said, his voice polite but firm. "Having some car trouble?" Karen found her voice. "We are here on official business," she snapped, pointing a finger toward my cabin. "This homeowner is in violation of HOA Estates bylaws." The sheriff just smiled. He hooked his thumbs in his belt. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying clearly for the camera's microphone, "I'm not sure you know where you are. This is Hickman County. HOA Estates is in Williamson County." He gestured vaguely to the east. "That's about 75 miles that way. You have no bylaws here. You have no business here. You have no power here." The camera zoomed in on Karen's face as the words hit her. All the color drained out of it. Her authority, the only thing that gave her meaning, had just been declared null and void. On camera, their power had evaporated in the fresh country air, and the internet was about to become their worst nightmare. The news segment aired at 6. Ben cut from my cabin to the lean and then ran the gate exchange, replaying, "You have no power here," 3 times. By morning, it was everywhere, and my neighbors were furious. The recall talk started immediately. My quiet neighbor Sarah called me. "Dustin," she said, her voice full of energy, "people are furious. I've had 5 people stop me on my morning walk to ask what we can do. The video blew the lid off everything." "What can we do?" I asked. "We recall them," she said simply. "Our bylaws have a provision for an emergency recall of the board. It requires a petition signed by 25% of the homeowners. Then, we hold a special meeting and vote them out. All of them." "Do you think you can get the signatures?" I asked. She laughed. "Dustin, after that video, I think I could get signatures from their own family members right now. I'll have them by the end of the day." She was a force of nature. For years she had kept her head down, just like me. But seeing the board's abuse of power laid so bare had awakened something in her. She printed out the petition forms. She and a few other motivated homeowners went door to door. They didn't have to argue or persuade. They just held up a phone with the news clip playing. People were lining up to sign. By dinner time, they had signatures from over 60% of the homeowners. The recall meeting was scheduled for the following week in the community clubhouse. The atmosphere inside was electric. Every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls. Neighbor Freddie had appointed himself Sergeant at Arms, which mostly meant distributing color-coded highlighters he called compliance crayons. He whispered, "Do we have a quorum or a cornum?" and then blushed so hard he matched the stop sign outside. Karen swept in first, red blouse ironed to a blade. Harold lugged a banker's box labeled "Budget, Trust Us" in shaky marker. Roger parked the faux Patrol Crown Vic by the clubhouse door, with the amber bar still mounted, and immediately earned a ticket from a county codes officer Sarah had invited for capacity and fire lane safety. The room chuckled. Roger tried to peel the magnetic decals off, and succeeded only in bending a corner. A toddler in a dinosaur t-shirt contributed a perfect whoop-whoop siren impression every time Karen banged the gavel. When someone asked about a line item called morale snacks, Wein through the under 130As, Harold fumbled his printout. Those were strategic pastries. Laughter rolled like surf. Sarah stepped to the mic. "Neighbors, we're here to stop paying for other people's hobbies." She held the petition aloft. Signatures rustled like a storm through the room. The jokes dried up, replaced by something sterner. Relief sharpening into resolve. Ballots slid across tables. Pens clicked. The spell of the old board was already broken. The vote just made it official. Karen, Harold, and Roger sat at a long table at the front of the room. They looked pale and shaken. The smug confidence was gone. They were facing a room full of their angry constituents, the people they were supposed to serve. Karen tried to take control. She banged the gavel and called the meeting to order. "We are here tonight to discuss the recent unfortunate media attention," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "There has been a great deal of misinformation." A man from the back of the room shouted, "We saw the video, Karen! We saw you!" The room erupted in agreement. People started shouting questions. "Is it true you hired a PI with our money? What about the fake police car? Did you really put a $30,000 lien on a man's house over a cabin in another county?" Karen banged the gavel again and again, but it was useless. She had lost the room. She had lost all authority. Harold was staring at his hands, refusing to look at anyone. Roger was beet red, a vein pulsing in his forehead. Sarah stood up. She held the signed petition high in the air. "According to our bylaws," she announced, her voice ringing with clarity and confidence, "we have the required signatures to call for a vote of no confidence and immediate recall of the entire board of directors." The motion was seconded by a dozen people at once. Karen tried to argue that the motion was out of order, but no one was listening. One by one, their names were read out, followed by the word "recalled." When the final result was announced, the room burst into applause. It was a strange, cathartic moment. These three people had held so much power, inspired so much fear and resentment, and now, in an instant, it was all gone. They were just three unemployed bullies sitting at a table. They gathered their papers in stunned silence and walked out of the clubhouse to a chorus of boos. As they left, I felt a sense of victory, but it was incomplete. They had lost their power in the neighborhood. We had taken back our community, but the $30,000 lien, the legal weapon they had created, was still hanging over my head. They were out of office, but they weren't out of my life yet. One more battle was left to fight, and this one would be in a courtroom. With the recall handled, the immediate threat to the community was gone. An interim board was appointed, with Sarah stepping up as the acting president. Her first official act was to post a notice declaring that all fines issued by the previous board were under review and collections were suspended. A collective sigh of relief went through Alea Estates. But my problem remained. The lien was a legal instrument filed with the county clerk. It didn't just disappear because the people who filed it got kicked out of their clubhouse positions. It was a stain on my property title, a legal time bomb waiting to go off. "We need to get that lien removed, and we need to do it now," I told Clive. "Even with them gone, it's still there. What if they sold the debt to a collection agency? It could get messy." Clive agreed. "We can't wait for a full trial. That could take a year. We need immediate relief. I'm going to file for an emergency injunction." An injunction, as he explained it, is a court order that forces a party to stop doing something. In this case, we would ask a judge to issue an order that would freeze the lien, preventing the old board members or any entity acting on their behalf from taking any action to enforce it. To get an emergency injunction, you have to prove two things to a judge: that you are likely to win the case eventually and that you will suffer irreparable harm if the injunction isn't granted. "Irreparable harm is easy," Clive said. "The lien is preventing you from the free and clear use of your property. That's a classic example. The likelihood of success, well, I think we're in pretty good shape there." He grinned. "It's not often I get to walk into a judge's chambers with a viral video, a whistleblower's thumb drive, and a PI who's already flipped." The hearing lands in front of Judge Evans. Clive shows maps, letters, the PI affidavit, and Linda's files. Clive laid out the map, the letters, and the jurisdictional overreach in one clean thread. He described the core of the issue: a homeowners association acting wildly outside its jurisdiction. "Your Honor," he said, "this is a classic example of a strategic lawsuit against public participation, or SLAP suit. It's designed to silence and intimidate. The lien was not filed to collect a legitimate debt. It was filed in bad faith, as a tool of harassment. They relabeled outside property fines as assessments to reach his townhouse, an abuse of the bylaw. Then he played his trump cards. He submitted an affidavit from Bert Higgins, the private investigator, detailing who had hired him and for what purpose. He then presented the thumb drive from Linda Calloway as evidence. He had a laptop ready. "With the court's permission," he said, "I'd like to show you a few key documents from this drive." He pulled up the invoice for the drone, then the receipts for the fake patrol car. Then he navigated to the email folder. He showed the judge the email from Karen to the PI. the one where she said they needed to make an example of Mr. Harrow. The judge read the email on the screen, his expression growing colder with every word. He looked up from the monitor, his gaze landing on Karen. "Ms. Kennedy," the judge said, his voice low and dangerous. "Did you write this?" Karen stammered. "Well, Your Honor, it was taken out of context. It's a yes or no question, ma'am." "Yes," Karen whispered. The other side's lawyer tried to object. He argued that the evidence from the thumb drive was stolen, that it was inadmissible. Clive was ready for that. "Your Honor, the evidence was provided by a whistleblower, a volunteer who had a fiduciary duty to the homeowners to report the gross mismanagement and potential fraud she was witnessing. She didn't steal it, she was safeguarding it." The judge waved his hand, dismissing the objection. "I've seen enough," he said. He turned to Karen, Harold, and Roger. "The three of you, acting as the board of this association, used the dues paid by your neighbors to fund a private spy operation against one of your own members. You stalked him with a drone. You hired a man to trespass on his property. And you did all of this to enforce rules on a property you have absolutely no authority over. Then, you filed a $30,000 lien against his home to punish him." He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the small room. "This isn't just an overreach. It's a perversion of the purpose of a homeowners association. It's malicious. It's corrupt." He picked up his pen and signed the order Clive had prepared. "The emergency injunction is granted. The lien is frozen, effective immediately. No action of any kind may be taken to enforce it. Furthermore," he added, looking directly at their lawyer, "I want a full accounting of the HOA's finances for the past 2 years on my desk within 30 days. I am referring this matter to the district attorney for review." We walked out of the judge's chambers a few minutes later. I felt like a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The immediate threat was gone. The lien was toothless. They couldn't touch my house. Clive clapped me on the back. "That," he said, "is how you win the battle. Now, let's go win the war." The lien was frozen. They were legally barred from touching my home, but the fight wasn't over. Now, it was time to make sure they could never do this to anyone ever again. The next few months were a blur of legal activity. Clive was a maestro, orchestrating depositions, filing motions, and preparing for the final showdown. The forensic audit ordered by the judge came back, and it was a bloodbath. It detailed years of mismanagement and improper spending by Karen, Harold, and Roger. The fake patrol car and the drone were just the tip of the iceberg. There were board retreats at expensive restaurants, consulting fees paid to a company owned by Harold's brother-in-law, and thousands of dollars in legal expenses that were nothing more than retainers for lawyers to write threatening letters to residents for minor infractions. The audit was made public to all Elia Estates homeowners. The last vestiges of support for the old board vanished overnight. People were horrified to see how their money had been abused. Meanwhile, the district attorney's office had opened its own investigation based on the evidence from the thumb drive and the judge's referral. Things were moving on 2 fronts. Our civil case to have the lien permanently voided and a new criminal case building against the triumvirate. The day of our final court hearing arrived. This time, we were in the main courtroom. It was the scene from my memory, the one that had been the starting point of this whole story. The big map boards were there. Clive was by my side. Karen, Harold, and Roger were at the defense table, looking smaller and more defeated than ever. The gallery behind us was filled with my neighbors from Elia Estates. Sarah was in the front row, giving me a thumbs up. Even neighbor Freddie was there, looking nervous but resolute. They had come to see the end of it. Clive's presentation was a master class. He wasn't just talking to the judge. He was telling a story for the record. He started with the simple desire for a quiet place. My cabin. He painted a picture of a peaceful retreat, a man's escape from the digital world. Then he introduced the antagonists, a power-hungry HOA board that could not stand the idea of a homeowner having a piece of his life that they could not control. He walked the judge through the evidence, piece by damning piece. The deed search they performed, the first act of overreach. The delivery photo they found online, flimsy evidence for a monumental fine. He put the trail cam videos up on the large screen for the whole court to see. The shadowy figure of Bert Higgins measuring my mailbox in the dead of night. He then presented Bert's affidavit, where the PI admitted who had hired him. Next, he brought out the thumb drive. He projected the emails onto the screen, highlighting Karen's words. Make an example of Mr. Harrow. He showed the ledger, a clear and undeniable trail of misused funds, the drone, the fake patrol car, the motel bills for the PI. He laid it all out, a careful, methodical demolition of their case and their character. Your Honor, this was never about a mailbox. It was about power. When it was the defense attorney's turn, he didn't have much to work with. He tried to argue that the board was simply doing its duty, protecting the aesthetic uniformity of the community. He claimed the bylaws were vaguely worded and that they believed in good faith that their rules could apply to any property owned by a resident. The judge was not impressed. "Counselor," he interrupted, "are you arguing that if Mr. Harrow owned a fishing boat docked in Florida, your clients could fine him if they didn't like the color of his sail?" The lawyer stammered, unable to answer. The judge had seen through the nonsense. He didn't need much time to make his decision. "I find in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Harrow," he announced. His voice was firm, leaving no room for doubt. "The lien filed by the HOA Estates Homeowners Association is hereby declared null and void. It is to be removed from the county record immediately." A wave of quiet applause and sighs of relief came from the gallery, but he wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, looking directly at Karen, Harold, and Roger, "I am ordering the three of you to personally reimburse the HOA Estates Homeowners Association for all funds spent on this vindictive campaign. That includes the $2,500 paid to the private investigator and the $10,000 for the drone and the vehicle. That money will come out of your own pockets, not the pockets of the neighbors you were elected to serve." Harold looked like he was going to faint. Karen's face was a mask of disbelief, and then came the final, crushing blow. A man in a suit stood up from the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor, may I approach?" he asked. The judge nodded. "For the record, my name is Mark Callahan. I'm from the district attorney's office." He turned to face the defense table. "Based on the evidence presented in this court and our own investigation, the state of Tennessee is filing criminal charges against Karen Kennedy, Harold Pierce, and Roger Nettles. The charges include wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." A gasp went through the room. This was no longer just about me. This was about justice for the entire community. It was over. More over than I could have ever imagined. Justice wasn't just done. It was served on a silver platter with a side of criminal indictments. My grandpa's voice was in my head again. "Finish it." I looked at the three of them, their faces ashen as they were informed they would need to come with the DA's investigator. We had finished it. 6 months later, I'm on a flat rock at Piney Creek, boots off, water cold around my ankles. The DA took pleas, the trio paid fines, lost their board privileges, and sold their houses to reimburse the HOA. No victory parade, just quiet. Back in HOA Estates, Sarah's new board made everything transparent, cut the petty bylaws, added term limits, and an anonymous tip line. And the fear evaporated. I watch a sunfish flash under the ripples and think about code. Find the bug, ship the patch. The fight is over. The peace is won. In the hush of the Tennessee hills, I'm finally left alone.